G'day everyone. Today's video I'll talk briefly about my gym training, what's the purpose, why do I do it, and a bit about how I set it up, how the programming works, and then at the end I've videoed a full training session and I'll run through a full training session with some commentary. So firstly, why do I train? Well, I train to get stronger, simple as that. Right now for me, getting stronger means focusing on static strength, and that's focusing on strength for the sport of powerlifting, which is the three main lifts: the squat, the bench press and the deadlift. I currently train 3 days a week. That's usually Monday, Wednesday and Friday, but I can change that around. And my training is broken down into 4 to 6 week blocks. And each training block has a particular focus or a purpose. And I generally use 4 different types of training blocks in my training. The first type, and probably the most common block that I use, is a strength block. Strength blocks focus on the powerlifting movement. So when I'm doing strength blocks, I have a squat day, a bench lift day and a deadlift day. In these blocks, weights are generally higher, so there's pretty heavy sessions, and the reps are pretty low. I'm only training in the sort of 3 to 6 rep range. A typical block is 5 weeks, and the weight progressively gets heavier over 4 weeks, with the 5th week usually being like a deload or recovery week where the weights and the volume drop down a bit and I give myself a chance to recover. And then essentially I'll continue to repeat those strength blocks over and over. And the idea is that at the start of each block, the weight is slightly heavier than the start of the previous block. And at the end of the block, the weight is slightly higher than the end of the previous block. So you're kind of going, progressing in weight through the block, dropping back, progressive again, dropping back, progressing again, and then continuing to do that through multiple blocks, with your strength hopefully going up as that happens. Whilst the weights are a lot heavier in those strength blocks, the general training intensity is actually a little lower, with the program designed so that you hit all your reps in all your sets, and it's really designed that you don't fail any sets or fail any reps. The next type of block that I use in training is what's called a hypertrophy or hypertrophy or muscle building block, and these are a chance to have a little bit more fun in the program. They're generally where I'll follow somebody else's program, not something that I'm doing myself, generally a program that's written by another coach. And in these types of blocks, the volume, which is the sets and reps, is a lot higher. And the weights are generally lower, but the sessions are a lot more intense. So you're hitting failure a lot more and you're pushing your body really hard through those hypertrophy blocks. You're often hitting failure when you're doing your sets and even pushing beyond failure with partial reps and those types of techniques. The muscle building blocks are usually combined with a serious amount of eating, because the idea is that they're designed around adding some weight or building some muscle. And I'll only run 1 or 2 of these in a year, just because of how intense they are and the impact they can have on the body. I generally can't get through too many hypertrophy blocks in a year. I get a bit of issue with my joints when I do a high reps and high volume. And also just the pure amount of food that you're eating can be hard too. The last couple of blocks that I use are a peaking block, and peaking block is simply where we're focusing strength for the 3 big lifts, focusing on getting down to being as strong as possible for a single rep, and that's usually leading into a competition. So you're peaking for sort of 8 weeks leading into hitting a maximum amount of weight in a competition. And then we have recovery or restorative blocks, and they're usually run after a competition. It's lightweights, they don't include any of the powerlifting movements, and they're a chance to give your body some much needed recovery. The only other thing I guess that is part of training is also then obviously conditioning. And you'll see that I'll do my conditioning using the burpees. and I'm also using the sandbag work at the weekend. And the conditioning is really there to build cardiovascular fitness. It helps with mental toughness. So certainly like high rep burpees really help with mental toughness, so that when you are doing a hard gym session, they don't feel as hard. And they also help with mobility. Focusing on static strength can cause you to have some tightness in different parts of your body, your hips and your back particularly. And burpees, or I find for me that burpees really help with that mobility and just freeing those areas up and keeping me moving really well. So that's it, guys. That's it. That's an overview of my gym training, what I do, why I do it, and how the program works. And now what we'll do is we'll move into a commentary for last night's gym session. Managed to video every set last night, which can be a bit difficult to do in the gym, but I managed to do it last night. So I'll put some commentary too, and hopefully you can enjoy watching me getting through the sets. Okay, welcome to the commentary, everyone. Last night's training session started with behind neck press, which you can see now, 45 kilos weight for 3 sets of 10. Most of you will know last week I had COVID. I wasn't able to train in the gym, and I was planning to start a new hypertrophy block called Super Squats. It's a program that was published back in the late 80s, early 90s, around 89, 90. It was written by a guy called Randall Strozen. And anyone who's interested in strength training or history of strength should definitely check out that book. You can get an e-copy fairly cheap. And I was going to start that program last week, but I was unable to do that because I was home isolating. I wasn't very well. And I decided that this week I would start the program, but what I decided is I would do what I'll call a primer week, or a week of just getting back into it. And so I followed all of the exercises in the program, but I did them at probably slightly lighter weights than I would do if I was running the program, or as I will do next week when I run the program properly. You see here, this is the third set of 10, and I'm getting through those reps fairly easily without too much problem. Normally if I'm running a hypertrophy program like this, that last set I would be very close to failure by the last rep, and certainly wouldn't be as easy as that seen there. Moving from behind neck press into bench press, 3 sets of 12. Again, there's 85 kilos in weight, so again it's not a huge weight, but enough to do some work last night and get a good pump and kind of get me ready for putting a little extra weight on and pushing really hard next week. When I'm doing bench press here, regardless of whether I'm doing a lighter weight or a heavier weight, my setup around how I hold the bar, how I position myself on the bench, the tightness, the bracing, all of those things are the same for me, whether I'm bench pressing just the bar or I'm bench pressing a heavy weight for a maximum single. So it's all about practicing and getting your body used to the technique. There's a lot of improvement that can be made in strength just from practicing the movement, because at the end of the day they're all movements that include technique, and the better you get at the technique, the more weight you can move around. So every rep for me when I set up exactly the same. And when I'm running through these bench press, I'm trying to do quality reps all the way through. So I want the bar to touch the chest, I want a full extension, and obviously to keep myself in that good position. And you'll see there I'm just inside the wings on the bar with my fingers. They'll be in that same position every time. Shoulders are kind of tucked back into the bench, and I'm driving my feet into the ground. So I'm making the bench press a kind of full body movement. I'm actually pushing through my legs, and that in turn then pushes power up through your arms. So you're not just moving your arms up and down when you're doing this motion. 3 sets of 10, 12, sorry. That's the third set done. Then moving into some bent over rows, 75 kilos on the bar for these, and they're quite high reps, 15 reps. When I'm doing a strength block, I'm rarely moving anything more than 6 reps. So for me to start changing and do 15 reps, it's actually pretty hard. It takes a little while for the body to get used to doing those kind of high reps. So it's hard on the grip, but it's also hard on the muscles of the upper back. With the bent over row there, obviously trying to not move my back up and down too much, trying to just use the muscles of the upper back to pull the shoulders back, and not use too much body English to get the bar moving. There is going to be some, as the weights get heavier, it's impossible almost to not move, but the focus is on pulling the shoulder blades back and getting the upper back to do the work. The hands and the arms are really kind of just like hooks holding the bar. Next up in the program is barbell curls, and this is something that I don't do really very often at all. I don't do any direct arm work or curling work when I'm doing my strength blocks, so it's quite a change for me to do some curls, and I actually find them quite difficult. I guess that's just because I don't practice them. Putting some interesting faces there. It's always good to watch yourself back and see what sort of faces you pull when you train. But two sets of curls here, same weight, 10 reps on each set. And again, same as really doing any exercise in the gym. You're trying to focus on a particular muscle or a particular area. So, in this case, I'm doing bicep curls. So I'm trying to make sure that the upper arm is doing as much of the work as possible, and that I'm not swinging the weights up too much. Had a pretty good bicep and forearm pump after doing those, because I just don't do them at all. Alright, now the next is squats. So warm up with the bar. Same as when I'm doing any of the powerlifting movements. My setup, where I stand, where I hold the bar, is the same even if I've just got an empty bar on. So I'm treating that empty bar as if it's a heavy weight and trying to have consistency with no matter what sort of weight I'm moving. In the Super Squat program, and when I run this next week, there's actually only a single set of squats in the program, and it's a 20 rep set of what they call breathing squats. So it's a single set of 20 reps, and between each rep you pause and take 3 big breaths. And what that means is that the set takes a long time to get through, and you're also doing it with quite heavy weights. And for anyone who's ever done high rep squats before, 20 rep squats are very, very challenging. I didn't do those last night when I did this session. I just broke them down and did 3 sets of squats at the working weight, and that set there was just another warm-up set, 5 reps just to feel some weight on the bar. And this was the first working set, so only working at 100 kilos last night, nothing too heavy. Again, you'll see set up bars going in the same position, hands in the same position, taking a big breath, pushing down that breath into my core and really bracing hard through the midsection, and then opening my taint, or opening my thighs if you like, and squatting down between my legs rather than over my legs, and then hitting depth and driving the bar back up. You'll notice, or you may notice, my right knee. I've been having a few issues with my right knee. which is on the left side of the screen as you watch this, and you'll see as I'm coming up out of the squat, there's a slight wobble in that leg, and there's a little bit of hip shift to the side, and that's just because of the tendon issues that I've got in that knee. Normally when I squat heavy, I will use a knee sleeve just to put some compression around the knees, and that helps minimise that. Here when I'm squatting again, toes pointed slightly outwards, opening the hips, knees going outwards over the toes, and then trying to keep those knees out and drive them out as I come out of the squat. I don't want those knees to come together. And as I said, no matter whether the weight is an easy weight or a hard weight, trying to keep the same technique, the same movement consistent all the way through, so that every rep looks the same. That's something that I would advise anybody practice, anybody out there who's training in the gym, particularly if you're training for strength. Even your first warm-up set, if it's just with the bar, you should treat that as the same way you would if you were squatting 150 kilos, because it's a technical lift, and the more you train your body to go through that motion in the same way each time, there are massive benefits to you in terms of your strength gains. So it's really important to make every setup look the same, every rep look the same. Setting up here, big breath, brace, down, up. You'll see I'm breathing and bracing every rep, pushing that breath down into my midsection, and kind of pushing out with my stomach and air from the midsection all through my stomach and my back to make that middle of my body as kind of rigid and as tight as I can. And then once that core's in place, drop down, drive back out. Should be as simple as that. I think this is the third set. I think I went to 12 reps on this third set, just really to start feeling what the higher reps feel like, so that next week when I start doing the 20 reppers, that I've at least kind of got a feeling for what that was like. Actually liking the way I was moving here last night, and the depth was really good, and all the reps were really consistent. The bar actually felt fairly light. It's not a heavy weight for me, but heavy enough to feel like you're working. And last night the squats felt pretty good, so I was happy with that. Week off looks like it may have given me a bit of extra recovery in my legs and hips, so maybe that week off with COVID was a blessing in disguise. Now some dumbbell pullovers. These are just designed to kind of stretch the rib cage and the lats a little, but mostly it's around sort of stretching the rib cage, stretching the chest. These are a movement that I haven't done for years. I used to do these a fair bit when I was sort of in my 20s and doing more bodybuilding training and that type of stuff. But they're not a movement I've done for a decade at least. So doing them last night, it felt a little strange. Looking back on them there, ideally I'd keep my arms a little straighter than I am. I'm bending them probably a little bit too much. If I kept them straight, then I would get a bit more stretch through the lats and through the rib cage. So sometimes it's good to watch yourself back on video, because then you can see technique or things that you don't feel or you don't see when you're actually doing the movement. So one set of pullovers, and then after pullovers the program moves into a deadlift, either a stiff leg deadlift or a Romanian deadlift, and it's just a single set. The program's normally set at 15 reps, and I did 12 reps last night. Just as I said, priming the body this week and just getting used to the movements and feeling them out. When I run the program next week, I'll run 15 reps, and there's 100 kilos on the bar there. I will run the program at a heavier weight than this, but I will also use lifting straps because the grip is definitely a limiting factor when you're doing high rep deadlifts. There's only so many reps you can do before the fingers start to open. So next week will be more weight than that on the deadlift, and I'll be using a set of figure 8 straps just to keep the bar in my hands. Moving on to a second set of the pullovers. So there's a set of pullovers, then deadlifts, and then back to pullovers again. Again, same idea of stretching the rib cage, stretching the lats. 20 reps. You can do these lying along the bench, or you can do them lying across the bench. It's really up to you. It's just a personal preference. I've always done them across the bench like this. Only reason being, I think that's how I first saw them in probably an Arnold Schwarzenegger video back in the 1980s or something. But that's the way I saw them being done, and that's kind of the way I've always done them. So again, 20 reps on these. Hardest thing on these when you get towards the end is is actually in your neck, holding your head up. And when you're lying across the bar, you'll see I'm kind of moving forward and giving my neck a bit of a rest by putting my head on the bench. Really felt those in my neck. Again, it's not a movement I've done for a long time, so getting the body used to it. And then after that, finishing off for the end of the session was with just some ab work. So I chose to do hanging knee raises last night. The program's not too specific around what ab work you can do, and I probably won't do the same ab work every time I run it. This particular program, it's something I'm going to run 3 days a week. So I'll run exactly the same workout each time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And the progression through the workout is simply, if you hit the reps, you add weight. So if I hit 3 sets of 10 on behind neck press, like I did last night at 45 kilos, then the next workout I add weight to that and I'll go up 2.5 kilos. And if I hit 3 sets of 10 again, I'll add weight again. With the breathing squats, or the 20 rep squats, which is the main focus on this program, it's designed that you add weight every single session all the way to the end of the 6 weeks. So it's pretty intense 6 weeks. Looking forward to starting it next week. I hope you enjoyed the commentary of the session from last night. Guys, if you've got any questions, comments, stuff you want to know more about, please hit me up. Please like, subscribe. And from me tonight, that's it. I'm done.